Hey guys, welcome to Cinematographs. Now, in my opinion, one of the most interesting things to come out of this film year has been the release of Longlegs. Especially from a not well-established director or brand, the marketing has been impressive, whether that be with Micah Monroe's Heartbeat or the critics reviewing the film at 100% Rotten Tomatoes before its release. And the reception it's gotten has made people draw comparisons to other horror thrillers such as The Silence of the Lambs, Zodiac, or The Blair Witch Project, all of which isn't something to be taken lightly. However, to just clarify possibly the most important point here, Longlegs is not on the same level as these films, and calling it the scariest movie of the year can be misleading. I mean, who knows, maybe it is the scariest movie of the year? But that sort of phrase I feel like can set up the idea that the film is going to be like shaking in your chair scary. But that does not mean it's not good in its own right. Because Longlegs is not really that very forward type of horror that I guess is the traditional view of scary. There are some very real jump scares here and there, but the film's horror comes from something underneath the surface. The film follows Lee Harker, an FBI agent played by Micah Monroe, as she tries to solve a case of murders linked to Nicolas Cage's character Longlegs. It's not really a cover your eyes and peek through your fingers horror. It's a sit back and feel not normal horror. In fact, everything here feels not normal. The opening scene gives the film this sinister tone that plays really well and shows what the style of it is going to be like. And honestly, it might be the scariest scene of the film because it reveals something but not substantially enough to where you don't need to pay attention. And the scene as a whole is almost quick, so much so that it's difficult to just shake things off as you jump into the rest of the story. The film's editing is a gem, knowing exactly what to cut to and when. The style isn't fully linear, and that has a psychological effect that brings you closer to the characters. But the use of sound here is easily the standout, in general, and in how it's used for scares and moodiness. The design is so rich, atmospheric, and well done. The same thing goes for the score, which isn't too overbearing, something I find that can be a problem with a lot of horror films. This, along with the editing, isn't the only way the film keeps you into the world. If the opening scene is what grabs you, then these things are what grip you. Micah Monroe's character is reserved, but a lot of the shots are on just her. Sometimes they'll even be in shallow focus, and that helps give the idea that she has this sort of innocence to her, but that she spends a lot of time in her own head and that there's something slightly off. Her performance for that is spot on. She's awkward, but wants to prove herself as a brave law enforcement officer even if someone is holding her back. Nicolas Cage as Longlegs is terrifying. There was this big thing about his face not being leaked, and so I was expecting it to be the scariest thing ever. He kinda looks like the girl from The Exorcist whenever she's possessed, and that's scary, but it's not too bad. What makes his character terrifying instead is easily his voice. While Micah's voice is very full, his is fractured and just not normal. It almost haunts the theater whenever he speaks. Yet all of these not normal things aren't too obvious. In a good way, they fade into the background. It's different than just film, scare, and story. All of these things are interwoven together, which helps the eerie tone settle into your bones. You can't wonder about the mystery without wondering about Longlegs, without wondering about the murders, without wondering about what's going to happen next. It really takes advantage of what film can do and make you feel, which I appreciate a lot. Without knowing it at the time, I was spooked. I know I was spooked because I swear there would be flits of movement in the aisle next to me that didn't actually exist. I wasn't jumping, but I was jumpy. And honestly, if I'd watched it by myself at night, I would be freaked out going home alone. And I'll admit that watching some of these clips back, I'm still a little unnerved and hyper aware of every sound around me. Another aspect that I think makes the film effective at what it does is how there doesn't seem to be a moment of rest, but Lee is not constantly in a clear present danger. Sometimes she's at the police station around a lot of people, sometimes she's at someone's house. So there are scenes where you know things can go from 0 to 100 really quickly, like if she's alone at home and such. And there are also scenes where in your mind nothing should happen, but still you can't help but feel as if anything can happen, so it keeps you on your toes. But all of this to say, it's not a perfect film at all. The plot, and particularly the ending, can be predictable. The overall reveal or explanation of everything is a little unsatisfying because a good bit of it just gets said in one scene. Nothing really makes sense until the last 30 minutes, and it can get frustrating, especially with some of these characters. It's like you're clawing at nothing and everyone else is being unhelpful. I think the comparisons to some of these big classic horrors is due to how well the film plants these feelings of tension and suspense. It's like you're pulling on a cord, trying to learn more about this case, while subconsciously knowing that once you do figure everything out, it's just going to snap. Almost as if you don't know how you're feeling until it's too late. It has patience, which is a quality that may be rare to find. In fact, the director himself says that he doesn't really like watching modern horror films such as Pearl or Maxine. And that desire to make something different from beloved horrors of the recent years shows, which isn't me saying that this is better than those types of modern horrors, but just that it's not the same style. There were a lot of times where I felt similar to how I did when I was watching the films that Longlegs has been compared to. And though it feels like them sometimes, it makes its own waves with its own thing, incorporating elements that could be seen as more modern filmmaking, such as having chapter cards. My overall rating is an 8 out of 10. For me, it didn't fully live up to the hype, but I was surprised in a different way, and I do think it deserves some of its praise. I'm also not the biggest fan of horror in general, but Longlegs brings something to the table that feels new, making people ask questions such as, is this what modern horror should be? I would recommend checking it out if you're curious about it at all. It's not a bad film, even if you don't fully connect to it or are also a little bit disappointed by it. It's not perfect, but if you're looking for something that is a very good step in that direction of what can be considered more classic, then this is it.